Ipsos polling exclusive to Global News shows if an election were held today, 36% of eligible voters would cast a ballot for the Liberals, while 30% would mark an X for the Conservatives. The NDP are holding steady at 20%, while the Bloc Québécois are at 7%, and the Greens are struggling at just 3% of the vote.
Well, it is interesting when we start getting into a process in which we're discussing an election campaign, you can start to see the numbers fluctuate and then start to settle in to a certain point. And I think what this is settling into is something that shows that the question of whether or not the Liberals, if an election were held tomorrow, would form a majority is very much in the air, but it's certainly very much in question at the moment as well. Well, the problem that the Liberals have is that they've got to find a place where they're going to pick up enough votes. They're going to establish enough gap between themselves and their main opponent from the last election campaign. And so far, they haven't really found that. The best place that has enough seats to be able to do that is Quebec, where the Liberals find themselves in a pretty tight race with the Bloc Québécois. So it's going to be difficult for them to pick up seats there. In fact, in Ontario, what we're seeing is that the race has also tightened up. There's only an 8-point gap between them and the Conservatives. And that key 905 section, if we were to break it out into the city and the suburbs, you'd see that the suburbs were pretty close. That's a region that the Liberals swept last time around with a pretty big lead. So, it's not going to happen there. They already won just about every single seat there. So that takes us to British Columbia, where the Liberals are running in second, or basically tied right now with the Conservative Party of Canada. So it's difficult to see where they would make up that 15 or 16 seats that they're going to need.
Across the country, the Conservative vote is the strongest, with nearly 48% of those polled saying they are certain to vote Conservative, while that number is at 43% for the Liberals and just 31% for the NDP.
Well, if there's a low turnout election, if there's no excitement around this election and people don't really feel that there's a lot at stake, you get a low turnout election. And in that situation, that's to the advantage of the Conservatives. And the reason for that is they're more habitual voters and they're also more firm about their choice. A low interest election doesn't work as well for the Liberal Party and probably not for the NDP either. And the reason for that is progressive voters tend to be a little bit younger in terms of their orientation and less attached to the political system. So a low turnout election in which only the cores are showing up, there's a bit of an advantage there for the Conservatives. Is it enough to win? Not based on these numbers, but it's certainly enough to probably deny the Liberals a majority.
4 in 10, or 42% of Canadians, continue to believe the Trudeau government has done a good job and deserves re-election, but 58% are closer to the opinion that it's time for a change in Ottawa.
Well, the Liberals have strong fundamentals for two reasons. One, they have 50% approval. And when governments are at the level of 50% approval, that means that there's a pretty big pool of voters, certainly more than is voting for them now, that would at least consider voting for them just based on their performance. So they're in a pretty good spot there. And also their deserve to re-elect numbers, which we tend to find tends to align pretty well when you get closer to the end of the election campaign. The percentage of people saying that the incumbent deserves to be re-elected is at 42. If the Liberals got 42 in this election campaign, they would definitely form a majority. Yeah, well, the Canadian politics is not about the national numbers, it's about the regional numbers. It's about all the races that are taking place in the region. So if you're watching the election campaign that is rumored to be coming in the very near future, the thing to really, really look for is to see if the Liberals are able to establish a gap, a significant gap between themselves and the Bloc Québécois in the province of Quebec. If they're able to do that, then there's a chance that they might form a majority. And if that's not happening, next thing to take a look at is British Columbia. They have to have a big lead there, and they have to be able to pick up a significant number of seats to make up that 15 that they're going to need going to the next election campaign. The other wild card in all of this is going to be the performance of the NDP. If the NDP got 20 in this next election, that's going to be one of the highest performances they've ever had in their history, and they could serve as the spoilers in this campaign.